Hello, and welcome to MarsPod, the podcast about how AI is changing society and the big picture impact it can have on your daily life. Today's episode is brought to you by MarsCrowd, your one-stop data labeling and collection company providing real-life data to boost your machine learning models. I'm your host, Mark Wesley, and today's guest is Chen-Ping Yu, who is the founder and CEO of Phiar. Phiar is a spatial AI company based in Silicon Valley that has built the first high-fidelity AR navigation for driving. They've done this by using their ultra-lightweight DL AI that understands the surrounding at the edge in real time. Chen-Ping, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Mark, for having me.
Of course, it's an honor to have you on. So I wanted to kind of just give you an opportunity to briefly introduce yourself, who you are, what you're up to, and then we'll get into some of the other questions.
Sure. My name is Chen-Ping. I'm the co-founder, CEO of our company, Phiar. We're building AR navigation using our ultra-lightweight AI that understands the road. And currently, we're building that for driving purposes. My background is in computer vision machine learning research. I graduated from my PhD from Stony Brook University back in 2016. Focusing on computer vision and machine learning. I went to Harvard for my postdoc further in computer vision deep learning. And then I was thoroughly annoyed by Boston's driving pattern where I kept making wrong turns. That took me to where I am today.
Okay. It seems like that was an inflection point, so we'll have to dig deeper into that in a little bit. But it also, one of the things that we like to do at the beginning of each episode is ask somebody, what is your AI doomsday scenario? Do you think that robots are going to take over the world? What's your outlook on that?
It really depends on when, I think. I don't think it'll happen in any near future just because I'm in the AI industry, even though I'm not the most knowledgeable person in AI, but because I've done research in this area, so I kind of felt that we are really far from that kind of a threat. Because right now, most of our AI is only able to recognize things, meaning classify what is in this image, what are the different things moving in front of us, or recognize what people are saying. But to go from recognition to reasoning, that's a big, big, big hop. And therefore, and even at recognition, we're doing quite well, but of course, it's at the expense of a lot of processing. And therefore, I really feel like it could be a threat, but that will be way, 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 way down the line that we don't really need to worry about that right now. What we should be worried about is how to even get an AI to be able to reason. When we're able to do that, then we think about a threat. Because right now, even to get to that point, we're kind of far away.
So is the ability to reason kind of like the beginning stages of like artificial general intelligence?
I would say so, yeah. Just imagine how we're able to learn concepts from school, especially abstract concepts. I think understanding a concept is something, I don't think the computer is able to do that or even come close to that. The computer can memorize. It can generalize a little bit based on what it has memorized with, but to actually understand the concept like how we do, I don't think the computer is there yet. The AI is just far from it. And for sure, general intelligence, I think it's got to be something related to the AI able to understand something, and I think we're quite far from it.
Yeah, so I have a friend who's a data scientist, and he was saying that training AI is kind of like teaching somebody addition. Like you can teach somebody like 1 + 1 = 2. And maybe if they learn enough, they'll be able to start making inferences like, well, maybe 2 + 3 = 5. But they won't be able to go from like 2 + 3 = 5 to 2 × 3 = 6, right? They won't be able to jump from addition to multiplication. So it's like you have to kind of train it on each step. It's not going to be making quantum leaps.
Yeah, that's an interesting take because based on my understanding of where we're at currently, I don't even think an AI that knows 1 plus 1 equals 2 can already generalize to 2 plus 3 equals 5. I actually don't even think the AI is able to do that, but I might be wrong. But it's definitely true that right now, we need to teach AI a very specific task, and the task has to also be very constrained in terms of the type of scope the task is limited to. And the generalization ability of the AI is also very constrained. And that's why there is an active research field called domain adaptation for AI. That means AI trained from one domain is able to recognize another domain. And a lot of times, to humans, this is so easy. Say, if you're training AI that can recognize objects in New York City driving scene, domain adaptation might be that you want to make sure this AI also works if you're driving in the mountains. But like to us, that's barely any difference. People are still people, objects are still objects moving around. But for AI, it could already confuse them. And that's what I mean by AI is very, very limited to the scope that it was trained against. And we are really far away from a general reasoning of AI, because even for our current recognition tasks, we are still very, very limited to what the AI can do.
It's true. Yeah, I was talking to somebody just the other day, and they were saying that, like, there's just so many applications, different applications of AI, but they don't come together all as one. Like, you can't just make that quick jump from one application to another if it hasn't been programmed that way.
That's right. And that's why the current AI training requires a lot of data, because even for that very specific scope of scenario that AI is being trained for, we still need to give it a ton of data. And if you wanted to learn to generalize to other scenarios, you have to give it even more data to simulate or actual data of those additional scenarios. And that means, I mean, if you think of humans, when we are learning, we don't really need that much data. A lot of times you only need one picture, one instance. You can already form a mental picture of what this is and do a pretty good job in recognizing that object anywhere else. It's very different.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, yeah, I like your take on the Doomsday scenario. I don't think that it's anytime soon. Now I want to kind of go into kind of Phiar. Like, where did the name come from? I know that you touched briefly also on what the catalyst might have been, but I think we can explore that even more deeply.
Sure. So Phiar came from the combination of Phi, Phi, and AR, which then comes together into Phiar. The reason why we came up with this name was because our company deals with both AI and AR, and Phi is a Greek letter that is often used in mathematics as a stand-in for a golden ratio. So we want there to be a golden ratio between AI and AR. Therefore, we use the letter Phi, and also combining AR after it, and therefore it's Phiar.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty creative when I saw it. I wanted our audience to be able to understand a little bit more about the name, but I know that you talked earlier about having maybe a less than ideal situation driving in Boston. So I'd like to hear more about that, because it seems like it wasn't just an average frustration with a map or something like that, but it turned into the catalyst for a company.
Right. So I think what's really easier is if I can show a picture right now, but of course we can't. So I'll try to explain it. Is that everybody, when we're driving, we typically use some kind of navigation that could be Google Maps, Waze, or a navigational device, or in-car navigation. And, you know, I'm the type of person that heavily rely on GPS, because all I need to do is follow the route and I'll get to my destination. I don't really need to remember how to get there. And typically it's not an issue, but while I was in Boston, it was a big issue, because I didn't realize Boston's roads are so complex and intertwining each other on top of each other everywhere. People joked about how Boston's roads are really just pavements on top of horse routes, because it's such an ancient city. And I don't doubt that, because it's very complex. And when you're driving in Boston, that's what it looks like on Google Maps and Waze as well. It's just when they're trying to tell you where to go, but there's so many roads intertwining each other on that map, you just cannot tell which road is the one you're supposed to go. And I end up making wrong turns all the time, a couple times missing my meeting. And therefore I thought, man, why are we still using 2D map while driving? This is so 15 years old. And we all learned how to use 2D maps. But ultimately, when a person first started to learn how to drive and learning how to read the navigation, for example, my wife, she came to the US a couple of years ago. She had to learn how to drive. And it was a nightmare when she was trying to drive and read the map at the same time. She's like, oh my God, how am I supposed to focus and read the map at the same time?
Yeah.
You know, so that's a big issue. And therefore, I wanted to build that in AR so that we can really solve that problem once and for all.
It's true. I think that it's not just your wife that probably faces this challenge. I think that it's almost everybody. It's not a fun thing to try to look down at a map or try to listen, especially if you're listening to music. I know that some people hate when it there's something good like a guitar solo or something, and then all of a sudden it fades out, and then Siri or whoever tells you you need to turn left in 2 miles.
Exactly right.
Yeah, I think that's I like what you're doing. I think that the application of it is definitely necessary. I want to know, what was the path that you were on before this experience in terms of okay, now I think that maybe I want to start an AR navigation company.
Right. So the reason why I was doing a postdoc was because I was very interested in potentially becoming a professor to continue to contribute in the academia. I enjoyed research very much, and I enjoyed all the work I have been doing for the past many years of my life. But when I missed that meeting because of the wrong turn that I took with Google Maps, I think that just combined with a lot of things that was happening at the time. For example, a couple of my friends were involved at some capacity in their startups. So that I got introduced to the idea of startups, entrepreneurship a little bit. And I think I remember part of the key thing about starting a company is you want to start by being able to solve a pain point. And therefore, when I have this big issue, I was complaining about this missed turn that I made me miss my meeting to my wife that night. And I realized, wow, that's a pain point. And I have a computer vision background. This is something I can solve. And I think everything kind of connected at that time.
I think that that's a great point. Sometimes people make things because the technology exists, but it doesn't really solve anything that's pressing or necessary. And I think your experience is so common that people kind of just accept it as a given. Oh man, I missed my turn. I need to make a U-turn. I need to figure it out. In downtown areas, that's even more annoying because the traffic is worse. You can't really make U-turns. You have to end up making 3 more left turns or whatever. But yeah, I think most people, when I run into that scenario, it's just it's an annoyance, but I don't think I can do anything about it. And so I think that that's pretty awesome that it's wait a second, I have this AI background, this computer vision background. Why don't I do something about it? So I think that that's awesome. So I remember reading a while back that you had entered Phiar into YCombinator. I want to kind of talk a little bit more about that. What is that process like, and what are some of the benefits of YCombinator?
Yeah, so we were part of the summer 2018 batch. It was very interesting because we got some angel funding at that time, but we were looking for, of course, more funding. We found that accelerators provide mentorship and funding at the same time. And that's why we looked at some well-known ones, including YCombinator, Techstars, AngelPad, and we applied. In fact, at that time, we just searched on Google top accelerators, but we don't know anything about anybody. So we applied to all 3. We got interviews from Techstars, and then we also got interviews from YC. And that's when I found out, YC is kind of a big deal in the accelerator startup industry. And luckily we got in, but we spent 10 minutes on the application, where a lot of people, I think they actually putting a lot more effort, which is what you're supposed to be doing. So we totally got lucky because we didn't know, and unfortunately we were accepted.
Maybe it works in your advantage to a certain extent because you're just kind of showing the technology. Like you're not dressing it up at all. You're letting the technology speak for itself. Do you think that in like some strange way that might have actually worked to your advantage?
After 4 years of journey with Phiar, I absolutely agree. I think a lot of time, I mean, you of course need to try very hard, give it all you've got for everything.
Mm-hmm.
But oftentimes it's these things that you didn't expect to happen or you didn't particularly putting specific effort for turn out to be fruitful. So that's been interesting for us for sure.
So what were some of the benefits of that Y Combinator experience for Phiar? Like how did it set you up for future success?
YC was very, very unique in that while they provide mentorship, they don't provide office space, they don't have a very structured curriculum, if you may. In fact, not at all, nothing. It was just really ad hoc. It's more like if you need help, you can schedule an office hour with your mentor. Otherwise, they expect you to just work and get things to work.
I see.
So I think what really helped us was the network, the YC network that we had access to after we were part of the family. Otherwise, it was quite different from other accelerators.
Were you able to have any like positive experiences with mentorship, or was there any insights gained from that kind of helped you out?
Yeah, I think so. Our mentor was very helpful and provided us a lot of feedback in terms of how to maximize our value at demo day and also moving forward after that. And YC continues to be helpful after the batch. So I'm able to continue talking to our mentor over there to get feedback on different things. So yeah, definitely, I really enjoyed working with them and I appreciate all the value they're able to provide to us.
I see. What can you say about trying to get funding from VCs? Like, what is that experience like? What tips would you have for people? I'm sure that there's people in our audience that maybe starting or trying to get funding or interested in that type of situation.
VC funding is, I don't think there is a set prescription for that because every company is different and also every founder is different. But I think in a very early stage, for example, if people are raising for their seed, the typical things you want to maximize would be, or optimize, would be, of course, a founding team. They have to be very good looking because at that point, you don't have any market validation. You don't have really anything other than your founding team. So the VCs, they're really looking at, can they bet on this team to build whatever they're telling me that they want to build? And also scale the company, get to that traction that they're aiming for. So team is absolutely important. And when I say important, I think some of us, we don't believe in name brands, you know? But unfortunately, I think when you're dealing with fundraising, name brand is important. Meaning, where did you graduate from? Which company you worked at? Because ultimately, if you don't have those name brands on your resume, even if you're really good, the VCs, they don't know, right? They don't know how good you are other than looking at what's on the paper.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I think that is quite important. But fortunately, I think a lot of times it does correlate with a person's success to some degree, not all the time, of course. Because if you're really good, oftentimes, again, not all the time, oftentimes you would have some kind of name brand, whether from your prior education or from your company or something else that you're able to put on your resume. But of course, you know, I think it just sounds kind of shallow and superficial, but it is true. You know, I think that does matter.
I think people, I mean, I can understand people are looking for a frame of reference, right? Like if they don't know about your university or where you've, like what your track record has been from, they may see something attractive, but it's really hard for them to completely trust it because there's no frame of reference.
That's exactly right.
So for people that are kind of in that phase, maybe they don't have the track record that might be, I would guess, perfect. and they don't have the experience of getting funding previously. Do you have any tips or advice for somebody like that?
Yeah, of course, that happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at that point, you have to really demonstrate based on traction. If you're able to launch a product with your bootstrapped resources to get users, growth, and show that to an investor, that can offset a lot of things. Ultimately, that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
But I'm more talking about if you don't have those yet. Say you're working on self-driving cars, definitely no customer in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
But you still need money, right? How do you raise that money? That's when, those kind of credentials will help you to raise that big amount of initial funding.
Is that where maybe team becomes more important? Like if you're able to bring somebody to your team who maybe is more recognized in the industry?
Absolutely, because that can also be a validation of, as a founder, you're able to get really good people to join your team. And that's very important as the company grows, because you need to continue to hire and continue to convince people to join you while your offer package may not be as good as the big names. So yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about the technology of Phiar, about the AI architecture, as well as what makes it ultra lightweight. Like, how are you capable of having something ultra lightweight like that?
There's no single secret sauce for us. It's really a number of things that came from my previous conventional computer vision research and how we apply that to deep learning that ultimately also includes our know-how in the whole computer vision deep learning space. So it's really a combination of multiple different things combined.
I see. How does it, like, if you lift underneath the hood, like, how does it work? Like, being able to have AR navigation in real time? Because I know that that's something that's not an easy technology to accomplish.
Right. So what we realized was that when we're building AR navigation, in fact, we're building a self-driving car system without driving the car. Because if we're able to overlay information on the road, then that means if we have control of your car, we can just drive the car to follow that road in a very simplified sense, and that's self-driving. But we have very limited sensor information. We have one camera, we have a single mobile processor, but we have to build all of that path planning, perception, localization, navigation pipeline using very limited resources. And this is a very, very big technological challenge. And also that's the reason why our technology is very valuable, because this is like a mini self-driving car running on mobile devices.
I see. I know that in a lot of different AI applications, being able to go from the data set or the sample that you give into the generalization phase is a huge challenge, and that's where a lot of applications really struggle. For Phiar, having that limited source of data, like, how are you able to overcome those challenges and get to a point where the AR is promoting safety while driving?
Right. We of course have to collect a lot of different data. We have to try to collect for different weather conditions, different road conditions, different places. We also utilize GANs to generate synthetic data for different weather conditions to help us to make sure our AI is very robust. And of course, building better AI models to extract information more effectively. So all of those, there's just unfortunately no shortcut to that. Yeah,
it's true. But being able to kind of make the AI model more efficient and more effective is what causes Phiar to be as ultra lightweight as it is. Is that correct?
Exactly. So we need to be able to run multiple deep learning AI models on a mobile grade processor in real time and at high accuracy, and also running AR for the outside of a room scale typical environment. For AR, we have to run it outside while the car is driving at 70, 80 miles per hour.
Yeah,
definitely.
Exactly. I think that's where the amazement of the product comes from, is like, wow, this is happening in real time. Like, I would recommend to anybody who's listening to check out Phiar.net. There's video on your website that shows kind of what's going on. What is it? Is it semantic segmentation that's happening, where you're just seeing what the phone or the application itself is looking at, and it's pretty amazing to see.
Yeah, thank you. All the demos on our website, I believe most of them are real and live recorded. So that definitely showcase our capabilities.
Exactly. Yeah, I remember. Like, I'm not somebody who has a extensive background in computer vision. I'm a guy from marketing, right? But I found the videos themselves to be really entertaining and fun to watch. So I highly recommend it. I want to talk a little bit about your customers. I know that, like, from what I've seen, you align with tier 1 automotive suppliers. Is that correct?
That's right. So we develop close relationships with tier 1 suppliers in the automotive industry. We also directly work with the automotive OEMs to establish awareness. But ultimately, we are a small company, and therefore partnership is very important to help us get to the next level.
I see. Was that something that you identified early on? Like, did you know while you were building this technology in the beginning that this was probably something you'd need to do? Or is it something that you kind of shifted and realized, wow, this is, maybe there's some limitations or something and we need to kind of pivot to this?
Right. So originally we were building a mobile app for AR navigation because we wanted anybody driving any kind of cars to be able to access this software as long as they have a smartphone. And we did that. But the issue was that while our beta testers really liked this AR navigation experience, they also complained that to look at AR navigation on a phone screen, it's just really small to provide a very good user experience. And also because when you're mounting the phone on the windshield, when you're driving in more sunny areas, say in Arizona or in California during the summer, the sun directly just blasts on that phone, so it makes it heat up. And that's why we started looking into automotive, because we found that more and more cars are coming out with bigger and larger screens. And also the automotive OEMs themselves were already looking for and already shipping AR navigation. And that's why we thought, great, there's already product market fit there. We don't even need to pitch them the idea. They already want it. And that's why we switched from mobile facing to automotive facing.
I see. I think that makes a lot of sense. It's interesting because the technology could be great, but if the screen that you're looking at is not really set up for that technology or to bring out the best of that technology, then there's some limitations there.
Right.
Yeah, so I want to know just kind of what is your vision for the technology maybe 10 years from now? Like, if you could kind of just project into the future, maybe both what you believe will happen as well as like your ideal scenario for where this is going in 10 years, what would it look like?
To us, AR navigation is really the first, but also the foundational piece to really revolutionize in-vehicle experience in AR. Because everything about driving is about navigating to your destination, whether the car navigating on its own or you driving the car. But even if the car is driving itself, then the in-vehicle experience is even more important, because then what are you going to do? The car is driving itself. You're not doing anything. It's even more important to connect you with the surrounding, to really show you what the car is trying to do and all of that related content. And that's why we really envision that in-vehicle experience is going to be very much camera-based, because that's where all the richness of information around you can be delivered and can be connected to you. And that's where our AI engine is aiming to support, to be able to enable all the different kind of applications that can run in the vehicle to connect the driver to the surroundings.
Yeah, I think like there's also just that trust factor. Like if you're going, like there's probably a hesitance for a lot of people to completely just accept driverless vehicles. And like one of the things that I think would be interesting is, you're in a driverless vehicle, you're not controlling pretty much anything, but when you're on the street, you see that your car understands that a pedestrian is going through a crosswalk, right? Like, if you don't have that AR aspect to it, you see it, but you don't necessarily know that your car sees it. But when you see it with AR, you see that your car has identified it, it's blocked off that crosswalk, and now you realize, okay, the car has no intention of going through this crosswalk while somebody's in it.
Right, right. And that's why I think it's very important, even if the car is driving itself, for the people inside the car to be made aware what the car is doing, what the car is understanding, and what the car wants to do.
Exactly. I think that that's something that is kind of a barrier for a lot of people. Obviously, there's a huge debate about would people even accept a driverless vehicle, even if the statistics showed that a driverless vehicle was safer than, like, if I drove it myself. But it's just that lack of knowing what is being processed, right? And I think that AR has a real huge part to play in overcoming that doubt, I would say.
Right, right, exactly.
What is the impact that AR has on people's everyday lives? Not even just fire, but also just kind of that type of technology. What kind of impact does it have that maybe people aren't even aware of?
I think AR is going to be a really big revolution and disruption of how people navigate, interact, and experience the world. In fact, that's our vision, is to revolutionize how people navigate, interact, and experience the world. And that, I think, is just really the biggest thing right now is the lack of the hardware. Meaning you have all the AR, you have some AR content and some AR capabilities on a mobile phone, but of course the phone itself is not a great delivery device for that. And the AR headsets, right now, they're still chunky, their field of view of the goggles are not great. They heat up, their battery life is not very long. So the hardware is unfortunately not yet there. But assuming it's there, assuming it's like the glasses that people are wearing right now, that could really change everything, because in all the movies, you see a lot of, for example, Iron Man helmet. You can see that all the augmented reality and heads-up display information to assist Iron Man to maneuver in different ways, to make different decisions, to do different things. That could be in real life, as soon as we get those hardwares to be developed and to be more mature.
Exactly. I think that it's kind of exciting to think about, and then you might add a virtual assistant to that, right? Like you'd be able to kind of have that navigation or that AR and then be able to talk to it.
Right, right.
I want to also ask you, outside of AR or computer vision, is there any project going on in the AI industry that you think would be really fun if you were just on that team?
I think what would be very interesting is to work on AI general reasoning, like I talked about earlier, because that is going to change everything if you're able to actually make AI reason, to understand truly, instead of mainly memorizing and trying to generalize it a little bit outside of that. So that would be very, very interesting. And then, of course, would have a lot of applications everywhere.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I've been talking to some people who are really in that natural language understanding space, and just the idea of being able to go through like the natural language understanding, what are the limitations? How do you build a language model that doesn't just work for one thing, but it's able to understand all sorts of different contexts? It just really gets interesting in terms of what is the machine able to know or understand or infer from conversation or dialogue. I want to ask you, before we go, what is one misconception that people have about AI that you'd like to kind of set the record straight on?
That's a great question. I think right now, because of an AI boom, AI revolution from a deep learning breakthrough back in 2013, therefore people have unrealistic expectation of how powerful AI can do and can be, including, for example, do we need to worry about the threat of AI taking over the world? But I think that's a big misconception because AI is moving very quickly, but we are so far away from an actual AI that's able to reason and think that humans are inferior and they're stupid, we shouldn't leave Earth to them. That's just too far away. And because, like I said, right now, even for recognition tasks, we are still kind of just barely scratching the surface. So I think, AI is very promising for a lot of current tasks, but it's got a long way to go still.
I see. All right. And then finally, like if people wanted to learn more about maybe computer vision or AR, is there any resources that you could recommend to them?
For me, I typically just go onto YouTube and search for the keywords, and a lot of times I can find very good resources out of that already. So in fact, I would suggest make YouTube your best friend, because if you don't want to read blogs or read posts or read papers, then have someone explain to you, and you can find a lot of that on YouTube.
Exactly. I think it's amazing the type of education someone can get just from watching YouTube.
Yes, absolutely.
And how can people find more about you or more about Phiar? What are some good resources for that?
Funny thing is, I used to have a personal website. I forgot to renew it, and now, but somehow I think my website link is still lingering around the web. So if you somehow find my website link, you click into it, it's going to direct you to some weird website now, so don't do that.
Okay,
but otherwise, our company is... and I tried to buy that back, now it's very expensive.
Oh, no.
Yeah, the Phiar.net, Phiar.net, that is the company's website, so that has all the information about the company. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We have a contact us link on our website as well.
Okay, we'll include the URL in the description, just so ease of access.
Great.
Okay, thank you so much, Chen-Ping. It's been a pleasure being able to chat with you about this, and thank you for just your input on VC funding, all of the different stuff, the technology that Phiar's coming out with. It's been a fun chat.
Thank you, Mark. It's my pleasure.
All right, have a good day.
Thank you. Take care. You too.
That concludes today's episode. We want to thank you for listening all the way to the end. This episode was brought to you by MarsCrowd, your one-stop data labeling and collection service provider. For more info, feel free to click the website link in the description. We look forward to you tuning in for our next episode on how AI is changing society.